أهلا ومرحبا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. أنا مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. لقد مر شهر على الزلزال الذي أحدثه فوز دونالد ترامب في الانتخابات الأمريكية وعلى الهزات التي لحقت السياسة الأمريكية. ومنذ ذلك الحين يستمر الرئيس الجديد في هز نظامنا السياسي بتصريحات حول سياسات استفزازية مثل فرض الرسوم الجمركية على السلع المستوردة وترشيحاته للمسؤولين المثيرين للجدل لشغل مناسب حكومية عليا. كيف يمكننا مقارنة إدارة ترامب الجديدة بالإدارة القديمة؟ وإن كان الأفراد يؤثرون في رسم إدارة شؤون السياسة، فما هي الرسالة وراء اختيارات ترامب للمناصب المهمة؟ وبناء على قراراته حتى الآن، ماذا سنتوقع في أول 100 يوم من ولاية ترامب الثانية في البيت الأبيض؟ للمناقشة العملية الانتقالية في عهد دونالد ترامب، يسعدني أن أرحب باللجنة من الخبراء السياسيين تود جيلمان، جيسيكا تايلور وجوش كراشر.
Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. Well, we now have virtually a full cabinet announced by Donald Trump. What clues do they give us as to what his administration has in store? I'm delighted to welcome Todd Gilman, Jessica Taylor, and Josh Krashar to help explain all of this for us. First, one word from each of you, one word to encapsulate your description of the new Trump cabinet. Jessica, what's your word?
Loyalist.
Loyalist. Todd, what's your word?
Disruptors.
Disruptors. I'm going to ask about that. And Josh, what's your one word?
Heterodox.
Heterodox. Well, that's a big word. I'm not sure how we even translate that one to Arabic. Okay. When you look at his cabinet, Todd, who stands out not as a disruptor, but who stands out as a traditionalist? Somebody that is a calming influence. Somebody that in the first term, we would have said, they're there to give the guardrails to protect American democracy and our system of government from the innovation that Trump brings.
I'm not sure I see anybody who presents guardrails. I think that Jessica nailed it with loyalist. I did pick a different term just because she already picked that one. But the most ordinary, straightforward, Senate confirmable nomination is Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. And the reason I say he's not going to present guardrails is because he's also a loyalist. And he has shown himself to be exceedingly malleable when it comes to Trump. He obviously competed against Trump for the presidential nomination 8 years ago. He didn't do well. They were at each other's throats. Trump ridiculed him, and now he is an incredible Trump loyalist. His foreign policy views, however, are very much within the mainstream of traditional conservative Republican national security hawk views. He's especially anti-communist, having a Cuban-American background, but he's also a hawk on China. There are many ways in which his views dovetail with Trump's Middle East, but guardrails in terms of Trump wants to do something absolutely wacky and off the wall, I'm not sure that Marco Rubio is going to be the one to stand up to do that.
Will there be anybody in this cabinet that will do that, Jessica? What do you think?
I think that's to be seen. Someone like Scott Bessent at Treasury, we don't know a lot. He's worked for Democrats in the past and different things, but he's sort of, again, as Todd said, sort of been malleable in different things toward Trump. I think that we're still watching to see if all of these nominations go forward. I think Pam Bondi now as Attorney General after Matt Gaetz resign. I think she is someone, she is a Trump loyalist, but she is sort of more in that conventional mode. She's not going to sort of, I think, she might even just be a party line vote, but she's not someone that's sort of going to upset Democrats in the way that Matt Gaetz did. And if they turn to someone like Joni Ernst, who's an Iowa senator, so I think, we just don't know. We don't know yet, but I think, the ones that have really sort of upset the norm so far, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at Health and Human Services, and certainly Tulsi Gabbard, for DNI. Those are the ones that are sort of raising the most red flags, certainly. And I think some of these others, someone like Kristi Noem at DHS and different things, she probably is more of a traditional pick. She's the governor, former House member, and different things, but she's also someone that's going to certainly reinforce Trump's policies. But then again, certainly Trump's worldview is different than past presidents, but the job of the cabinet is to do what the president says as well.
So, Josh, Todd used the word disruptor. Who do you see in this cabinet as a disruptor, and what does that mean in practice?
Well, there are a lot of nominees who certainly tag as disruptors, people without a whole lot of requisite experience. Gabbard, who has praised Bashar al-Assad, visited Syria, has praised or at least defended Putin right after his invasion of Ukraine. Those are folks who I think the confirmation hearings will be very telling on where the Republican Party is in its willingness to offer a check of the administration in areas where they disagree. RFK Jr. Was talked about by President Obama as a very progressive EPA head. No one really batted an eyebrow back in 2008, when that was being reported. But now that Trump has picked him, his left-wing views actually could cause issues with a handful of Republican senators, and he certainly promises to disrupt the HHS if he is confirmed. Jessica really hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is a loyalist group of officials that has been nominated, but frankly, every president, save for a few exceptions, picks loyalists. I think Jessica just made that point, and I think it's an important one. That's not unusual. That's not disruptive. That isn't very, very, very different than what we've seen in the past. In fact, I think you could argue that Trump's first term cabinet, especially given how new he was to Washington, these were people who were disloyal to him. These were people who actually leaked and acted against his interests behind the scenes. And that was sort of what's led him to pick such a group of enforcers in this new cabinet. But I do think I don't know if I do entirely agree with Todd about the national security team. If anything, I was actually sort of surprised that he's picked a conventional group of traditional conservatives. Rubio's one of them at Sec State. Mike Waltz, regarded as one of the leading national security voices that will be in the president-elect's ear, is one of the most widely respected lawmakers on national security in the House. That was a relieving pick to a lot of national security conservatives and establishment folks. Gabbard, the one exception, and Hegseth, I think it's very likely he may not survive the confirmation hearing if it even gets to that point. And we're hearing names like Governor Ron DeSantis, Senator Joni Ernst, who are much more conventional, much more traditional in their conservative orientation.
I mean, there are some names here who are unusual for, given the MAGA moment in which we're in. Josh just mentioned Mike Waltz, who worked for, of all people, Dick Cheney in a prior incarnation. And then you have, Jessica mentioned the Treasury Secretary, who is a gay man who has, 2 children with his husband. And then, of course, the Health Secretary, if he gets confirmed, is pretty soft on abortion rights. Todd, how is sort of the MAGA universe reacting to some of these un-MAGA-ish nominees?
Well, I'll fall back on my disruptor claim. There are many loyalists, and Josh is absolutely right that presidents generally pick people who are going to be loyal to them. But prior to Trump, there was never a real distinction to be made between exceeding personal loyalty to the president and also obedience and respect for the Constitution and the rule of law and the norms of American democracy. And when I don't want to speak for Jessica, but when I think of the word loyalty in terms of the Trump picks, I mean loyalty to the exclusion or the potential exclusion of other attributes and assets. So the prime thing is loyalty. MAGA world is perfectly happy to have conventional foreign policy, national security picks, which Josh is right. This is in many ways a pretty standard, except for Tulsi Gabbard probably. But what they really care about is owning the libs, and they're willing to accept a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in terms of his progressive policies because he's also anti-vaccine and because he's also iconoclastic in so many other ways. And there are plenty of views that he has that are perfectly within the norm. He's worried about additives in food. That is something that we should all be worried about. We should be worried about side effects of vaccines, but he goes a lot farther. And I don't want to say that everybody who voted for Trump believes that vaccines cause autism, which the scientific evidence is that they do not. But there are enough people who believe that and enough people who support Trump that like the idea, just to use him as an example, that he's going to shake up the status quo. He's going to throw a monkey wrench into the FDA and the scientific process that we've relied on for generations for government oversight of these industries. So there are a lot of different threads going on here, I would say.
All right, when we come back after the break, we're going to turn from the Trump cabinet to early announcements of Trump's intention for policy decisions and the reverberations those are already making around the world. In just a moment. Our guests today include Todd Gilman. Todd recently joined the faculty of Arizona State University's School of Journalism. He previously spent over 30 years as a reporter for the Dallas Morning News before retiring as its Washington bureau chief. He is past president of the Regional Reporters Association and was elected 3 times to the board of the White House Correspondents Association. Also joining me today is Josh Kroshar. Josh is editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Previously, he was managing editor for political coverage at the National Journal, executive editor of Hotline, and political correspondent at Politico. And with us today is Jessica Taylor. She is the Senate and Governor's editor for the Cook Political Report, covering local and national politics. Jessica is also the first woman senior author of the venerable Almanac of American Politics, a post she held in both the 2022 and 2024 editions. Josh, before we turn to Trump's policy pronouncements, I do want to ask you this. He's already nominated or intentioned to nominate the fathers-in-law of his 2 daughters to new positions. One father-in-law will be ambassador to France, and another father-in-law of his other daughter will be his senior advisor on Middle East peace. Is this unusual in American politics?
Yes. Look, for Trump, he viewed his personal business as something of a family business, and we saw even in the first term that he relies on family members. In fact, it was very unusual being at the Republican National Convention just a number of months ago and looking at some of the most high-profile speakers testifying to Trump's qualifications as president being family members. Lara Trump, his sons. It is interesting when you bring up those 2 appointments. Tiffany Trump's father-in-law was seen as sort of the liaison to the Arab American community during the campaign, and he was quite effective if you look at some of the results in some of the communities he campaigned in. And that's, I think, the position is seen as something of a reward to that work on the campaign trail. But his views on the Middle East are somewhat at odds with other people in his family, like a Jared Kushner, or his father's named ambassador to France. But they're a lot more close family members or close associates who are very pro-Israel and have had a very different view and campaigned differently and sent different messages on those issues. So it is going to be interesting who he listens to within the family, because I do think he's almost created, you've heard of team of rivals within a cabinet. Now you have something of a team of rivals on the Middle East within the extended Trump family with these selections.
Well, I think Jared Kushner's father-in-law was pardoned by Trump. He was convicted of tax evasion and trying to have a sting to get someone else convicted and different things. So, as the criticism mounts over President Biden pardoning his son Hunter, I mean, this is another man that had faced other serious crimes and different things that Trump pardoned within his family as well. So I think, it's not necessarily that. Listen, these ambassador posts go to loyalists. Every they go to big donors and different things. So for me, the Kushner pick is that, that it goes to a family member, but it goes to one that, he pardoned and was federally convicted.
Well, I think we can count on some fascinating family dinners during the Trump administration. All right, let's turn to some early Trump policy pronouncements, the biggest of which the intention to impose tariffs, not just on China, which was expected, it was a key theme of the Trump campaign, but also on Canada and Mexico, one could argue America's closest allies, our neighbors to the north and south. Jessica, why does Trump want to put tariffs on Canada and Mexico?
I think that he's trying to sort of be this strong arm and say, that these things should, that they should be levied against other companies, that, trying to protect the sort of the America First brand and things too. But it also sort of goes against, the sort of NAFTA that that he reworked during his term, the North American free that he reworked the trade agreement, he reworked NAFTA during his first term. It goes against that, and you're already seeing, for instance, Justin Trudeau in Canada has gone down to Mar-a-Lago to sort of kiss the ring to try to ease this. Someone that campaigned on, I was surprised that the tariffs didn't get more of an emphasis in Harris's campaign, because you look at what economists say about this, and especially when it's North American companies and what this could do. And I think now we are seeing economists sort of raising the red flags even more so of what it could do to prices immediately, especially on things like electronics and different things and pharmaceuticals. And that can be a really big wake-up call for a lot of people that voted for Trump, anticipating that prices and things were going to go down. So I think that, Trump he's not an economist. He sort of makes these big pronouncements and thinks this sounds good and this is going to project American strength. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty, when looking at, a world that's ruled by free trade, I think that people are more open to things like China and different things. But when you're looking to, our neighbors here in North America, it is very different.
So, Todd, were these opening gambits by Trump? I mean, we've seen Justin Trudeau smiling after leaving dinner with Trump. Trump had a conversation with the Mexican president. Are we likely to see much lower tariffs in the end than Trump threatened, and some understanding between Trump and our partners to the north and south?
I would think so. These proposals for high tariffs are opening gambits in different ways. So with China, we have legitimate trade issues. They dump solar panels, which are hugely important. And we just heard in the past couple of days, they're going to retaliate by withholding some of the critical minerals and materials that are used in semiconductors for the U.S., the growing U.S. semiconductor industry. So I don't think Trump has totally thought through that this is not a one-sided war where we're the only ones with tools and weapons. So China is a whole particular set of issues. They're mostly trade related. The issues with Mexico are not so much trade related, and it's more of an opening gambit in terms of putting pressure on the new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, to tighten up the border and assist and cooperate with whatever draconian measures Trump plans to take, mass roundups and mass deportations. He's going to need Mexico's cooperation to deport millions and millions of people who've been living in the U.S. illegally. And so I would look at the threats of huge tariffs against Mexico as a chess move in order to force a certain level of cooperation on border and immigration and fentanyl kind of issues. Canada's a little harder. There are legitimate trade issues having to do with pulpwood and various things, but we are so integrated with the Canadian economy, and then for him to come out and make this quip, this joke that maybe Canada, if they don't like the tariffs, should become the 51st state. But first of all, Canada is enormous, and they have, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they have 10 provinces. I'm not sure why they'd only get one state. It's hugely insulting.
All right, so Josh, another arena in which the president-elect has made some pretty substantial pronouncements, as Todd just referenced, are the deportations. What is the prospect for early moves on this? Is our system prepared for the types of massive deportation that President-elect Trump has talked about? And are we already seeing some reactions to what is likely a move to begin a deportation process?
Yeah, this is likely going to be one of the big priorities in the first 100 days. That's usually when a newly elected president has the most legislative momentum, and I would expect immigration, given both public opinion on the issue. It was an issue where I've never seen such a swing in public opinion. When Biden came on board, he loosened a lot of the regulations and policies that Trump implemented, and I think he later politically speaking, at least later regretted it and withdrew some of them. And the public opinion shifted as the border crisis became much more significant. Picking Tom Homan as something of a border czar is a sign of how Trump is going to move on the issue. Homan, agree or disagree with him, very competent, very skilled at navigating through the bureaucracy. Stephen Miller being in that sort. I think when you look at the cabinet, we talked about that earlier, but I don't know if the cabinet's going to have a whole lot of influence in some of these agencies. It's going to be run, I think, more through the White House, and Stephen Miller, who's obviously one of the most restrictionist immigration advocates in this inner circle, is going to have a lot of influence from the White House. So I think politically speaking, the deportations are going to center initially on sort of criminals and people who maybe the people who came most recently illegally. But yeah, I do think that this is going to be a question of whether there's overreach. I think there is political support for deporting criminals, deporting people who have not been here for a long time. But if this administration deports dreamers or people who have longstanding ties to the country, even if they don't have full citizenship, then you can see the backlash that could emerge. And I think there is a divide too on the legal versus illegal. There are people who are illegal immigrant hawks, but there are folks like a Stephen Miller who actually want to decrease legal immigration. Elon Musk, who's another top advisor, and there are other folks in that camp, want more legal immigration. They want more educated workers coming into the country to help their businesses. So that is going to be another divide to watch as this gets implemented.
Just on this general issue, Josh, first Trump term, there was the issue of the ban on people from Muslim majority countries that was reworded a couple of times. Do we expect Trump to impose such a ban again?
I don't think you'll see the crude wording, but I do think that there is public support for. I mean, you see this in the context of some of these anti-Israel protests on college campuses.
All right, we're going to have to stop it there. I want to thank you, Jessica, Josh, and Todd, for helping explain where we are so far in the Trump transition and the move to the inauguration, third week of January 2025. Thank you for joining me this week on داخل واشنطن.
وصلنا إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أسئلة أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، خاصة فيما يتعلق بفريق الأمن القومي في عهد الرئيس ترامب، أرجو التواصل معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج InsideWashington أو مباشرة @RobSatloff. أراكم في الأسبوع المقبل، وحتى ذلك الحين شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.